Let's open up the Vintage Collection 3.75-inch Darktrooper figure from the Mandalorian.
Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it.
Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. The past few months for us here in New Zealand, it's a little bit quiet in terms of new Star Wars action figures. And then suddenly this week we had new waves of both Black Series 6-inch figures and Vintage Collection 3.75-inch figures. So it's been an exciting week for us here in New Zealand. One of my highlights from the new figures is this Darktrooper from the Vintage Collection line. I love the Darktrooper from the Mandalorian. I think it's cool. And it's one of those figures like Stormtroopers that I really want to army build for a scene in my collection. I do actually own this figure already, but you are probably familiar with the deluxe version of it. This is the version that I already have. And because the deluxe figures come with accessories, they have a higher price tag. And I didn't really want to army build at the deluxe price point. So I'm really excited to see that the single issue standard version of the figure is now available in New Zealand. So I'm hoping to snag quite a few more. I was able to find one so far and I'll be on the hunt for more. Very excited to open this one up and see if it's any different to the deluxe version as well. We obviously have less accessories, but I want to see if they've changed up any of the molding as well. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll get the figure out. We'll go over all of the details, do a comparison, but first let's take one last look at the backing card. Of course, I love the packaging for the Vintage Collection, but every now and again there's a backing card design that just really stands out, and this is one of them. I really am keen to find another one to keep carded because this just looks amazing. Of course, we've got the style heavily inspired by the original vintage Kenner action figures from the 70s and 80s. We have the Star Wars logo here with the single chrome racetrack surrounding the character art here on the side. Of course, we have the Mandalorian series logo here in red. I really love the strong red and black color design. Of course, the Vintage Collection has a black backing card, and the series and film logos are generally all in red as well. But for the Darktrooper, we have the red accent color for the title there as well. We have the white font, Darktrooper, and of course the red accent color in behind the figure as well. And I gotta say, I love the side art here. It is a really dark trooper figure, of course, and so I wasn't sure how well it would sort of read in person. But even though it's almost completely black, they've done a really good job of using the sort of shiny highlights to really show off the details, so it doesn't read very dark. Really, really nice. And of course, we've got the hallway behind it. We can see the eyes, we can see the blaster. Just really nice. I'm really impressed with how much detail I can see. Even sort of all the droid components here along the legs. Really cool. And we can see that we have a standard black trooper figure here. The deluxe one came with other accessories. This one just has one blaster rifle. That's pretty much all you really need to create a really cool dark trooper army. I just love the sinister black and red of this card. It just looks amazing. So moving on to the back. So this one is kind of interesting because this is an older VC number. We're well into the 330s now with the newer figures, but because this one is a slightly older figure, we have an older VC number here. This is VC271. Now, of course, the new cards have this new swipe. Slightly older figures, generally in the 200s and back, we had that older style with that black background with the chrome racetrack and previews of other figures from the wave. Just before they hit 300, they changed the design. So it's kind of interesting to see an older VC number, 271, with the newer card back design. It's kind of an interesting mix. And again, we have that strong dominant red color here because that is the accent color from the front of the card. They use it again on the back. We've got a picture of the backing card here and the action figure out of the packaging posed with the accessory. We can see it holding the blaster rifle there, which is fun because it really matches the pose that we can see there on the backing card. I really like that. We also have a blurb here on the back of this new backing card style. It reads, hulking Imperial combat droids with gleaming black armor and powerful jet boots, the Darktroopers are a powerful design. It does say powerful twice in there. Perhaps they could have used a different word, but nonetheless, it's a good little blurb there. We have the Vintage Collection logo down here, and the rest of the backing card is a light gray with the barcode, copyright warning, all of that kind of stuff there. I think the front of this backing card is just fantastic. This is going to be a hot item for fans of mint on card figures because, of course, that earlier version was deluxe, and it doesn't look quite as fun. Let's do a quick comparison. So the backing cards for these deluxe boxes are generally the same shape and size as a standard figure backing card, which you can see there. We've still got the logo and the chrome racetrack, but instead of the fantastic character art that we have there on the side, we just have promotional toy photography. This is a picture of the toy, not the character from the show, and we don't have the sort of the strong red accent color because we don't have a bubble, of course. And of course on the back we just have that same picture again. We can see the accessories that came with this one. We had the figure, swappable hands, blaster rifle, jet boot sort of effects there to connect to the feet, and this kind of large docking section there, so you can sort of stand the figure in its sort of charging bay there. So I have opened this one up. I kind of like the figure. There are some elements to it I'm not as fond of. I especially don't like swapping hands, and once you put those flame effects on the feet, you can't stand the figure up. So it's more of a play feature, which is a little bit unusual for an expensive toy because these do cost more than standard ones. So of course this one doesn't come with those flame effects, but I don't use them in my figures because of course you can't stand them up. And I didn't really like this docking bay. It kind of looks cool, but it was a fiddle to put together, and it just, the hoses never really sat right with the figure. It was kind of fun as a little bit of background decoration, but I don't need to army build that one. One is enough for me. So I'm really excited to see this one being available for collectors to add an army build. So let's get stuck in and open this one up. So now I have the Darktrooper and the one blaster rifle accessory out of the packaging, so we can go over all of the details. And the first thing you can see, I've moved his arms facing forward because he is very hard to stand up straight. I feel like this figure is just a little bit wobbly, and it feels like it's designed to be balanced with his arms out in the front. As soon as I put his arms down by the side, he's just going to tip back. There are peg holes on the underside of the feet to attach to a third-party stand, which I'm probably going to do because I don't want this one tipping over. But let's go through all of the details. I'm expecting this one to be very, very similar to the deluxe one, but if you don't have the deluxe one, this will be new to you. So let's go through. I'm just going to pop his arms back down. So one of the really cool aspects to this figure is the sort of visor effect. So this is an old school trick. I remember it really well from those old sort of Power of the Force 2 era Jawas, where you have sort of this translucent plastic sort of running through the head. So we can see we've got this translucent red plastic section here, which actually lets light in all the way through to the sort of eyes here. So when there is ambient light or direct light, it's going to go through that plastic and make it look like the eyes are glowing, which is fantastic for Jawas and for Darktroopers. It gives it just a really cool effect. Even though, of course, at the back we've now got this sort of big chunky red light looking section at the back, I think just the effect on the eyes is worth it. It's just, I don't think it would look quite as cool if this was just simply painted red. I love how glowy it looks. Of course, if your display room or the shelf is a little bit dark, you probably lose a little bit of that effect. But you know, LEDs are great for lighting up collectible displays, so I think this is really fun. I love it. In terms of painting, there isn't a lot. As we can see, he's pretty just gloss black all over. There are a couple of elements with some painted designs. We have some very small red dots here on the chest piece, which look nice and tidy. There are 4 of them there. The rest of it is just a couple of silver accents. We have some silver parts here on the upper arms and on the forearms here on both sides. It's kind of helpful if you've been playing around with the articulation. It helps you remember which way is facing forward because they're sort of angular. They kind of look similar from different angles, but yes, the silver is on the front as it is packaged. And tipping to the side, we can see that we have silver at sort of the droid connector pieces here at the joints. So particularly at the knees, the ankles, at the wrists and the elbows there. And again, on the other side, stands out really nice against the gloss black. On the back, he's just straight black. We can see all glossy there. No other paintwork there, but there isn't really. It's just supposed to be an imposing black droid trooper, and it looks fantastic. So The last one I opened up had a few quirks, and I'm curious to see if this one is an improvement. Something I don't like about the deluxe figures, for me personally, I like to look over my figures before I purchase them, just in case there's any flaws that I can spot through the plastic bubble. Those deluxe ones, particularly the ones released during the plastic-free packaging era, meant that you couldn't see inside the box. So there were a couple of things about the deluxe Trooper figure that I felt were perhaps maybe a flaw that I probably wouldn't have purchased if I'd been able to see the figure. But this one, of course, I could see through the bubble and it looks fantastic. So I'm going to go through, just take a quick look at the sculpting. It's very black, but it is really cool. So we've got this sort of big, thick chest area here with these angled sort of shoulder plates here as well. So on the Black Series figure, these ones are quite sort of rubbery. They feel firmer on this figure. And I think, I'm not sure if these ones are actually going to move. They feel pretty fixed, even though they kind of look like they might move at the attachment points here on the chest. They feel very firm and fixed, but I can still move the arm up quite well like that. I really like the sort of angular design. Obviously, Hasbro has to copy what Lucasfilm does on a screen, but these are just fantastic. I love just the sort of angular black. It gives off very strong Darth Vader vibes, obviously, but when it's sort of its own sort of robotic, like if Vader had gone all the way, just sort of Grievous cyborg-esque, where you've just got just a few parts left, I can imagine this is what Darth Vader would look like in another alternate galaxy. And then we can see some of the sculpting details here on the legs and around there. Really fun. We've even got some sort of Stormtrooper knee plate elements here, like we've got the sort of knee plate here coming up, of course, sort of helping to sort of hide the knees there from the front, a little bit of protection. The thigh plates actually look most like almost Stormtrooper armor. We've just sort of got these circular sort of details here and this little rectangle box there. And we can kind of see, if I rotate the thigh, the sort of droid parts here on the inner thigh section there. Really fun, very gloss. And of course we've almost got this another Stormtrooper element with the belt. Of course it's a droid, it doesn't really need a belt, but we've got that sort of style coming in there. And we've got this really interesting sort of cutaway almost style here at the waist. It's not sort of covered. And we've got these little rods connecting up with some really fun cutaway section detail there. Really cool. And of course the back plate, again, giving me strong Stormtrooper vibes here as well, with those sort of recessed details. The way it sort of angles out, very much like the back plate on Stormtrooper armor. Really cool. It feels very Imperial, you know. So cool. I just love it. It's hard to see the detail because of just how glossy it is, but that's kind of the fun about it. It just looks so menacing. Just sort of this black droid. Really cool. And this one feels really nice. Something I had a little bit of a quirk about the deluxe figure that I had, the specific figure I had. It felt like it was just a little bit flimsy, like maybe something hadn't been connected quite right. This one, I can't explain, just feels a little bit firmer. I feel like it's made out of the same plastic. So I don't know. Just sometimes you get a figure that just feels like it's a little more fragile with the way that it was assembled. Something didn't click in quite right or something. This one just feels a little bit better in my hands, just feels a little bit more sturdy, even though it is very prone to falling over. We still have the issues of it sort of not wanting to stand up. And it's not because the ankles or any of the joints are flimsy. They're actually got more of a sort of a thicker size to the joints than I've seen on some other droids in this figure scale. So I'm not sure what it is. I think it's just the bulk around the chest that is just a bit top heavy and it's just not balancing quite as well. So it definitely needs a stand, I think. I think this is going to be pretty much exactly the same in terms of the articulation, but let's go through anyway. So I can turn the head to the side, which is quite surprising. I thought that the sort of the mouth part of the helmet would be hitting on these shoulder plates. Really, really love the design of the helmets. Of course, they look so menacing, and we've kind of got that Vader-esque sort of mouth part here at the front. Just so cool. Okay, and I showed before that the arms can come all the way up. That's really nice. And the arms just feel fun. So coming out to the front, we can go to here, and then we're going to start to sort of hit on these shoulder plates. So it's not really going to go up that well. Also, one of the major differences that I can sort of point out is the deluxe version comes with 2 sets of hands. Ones that are open to do a 2-handed grip on the blaster rifle accessory included, and then 2 that are fists. So you can sort of do that scene where they are ramming the door. This figure comes with 1 of each and no alternates. So I have 1 hand for holding the blaster rifle accessory. We've got an extended trigger finger there, and the left hand is actually in a fist. So technically, if this is the only Darktrooper figure you have, you will not be able to do it in a 2-handed blaster rifle pose like we see on the back of the box, which I think is a little bit interesting. Actually, let me double check that, because I feel... Yes, I didn't actually notice that. I just kind of glanced at it and thought that they're holding it in a 2-handed grip, but that looks like they are basically balancing the blaster rifle on a fist. I thought they would be holding it like I can do with my deluxe one. When I saw this, saw that, and because it's so dark, I didn't actually note that that is just a fist underneath the blaster rifle. It's kind of a little bit hidden there on the back of the backing card. So yeah, I think it's interesting. Personally, I would have just done the 2 open hands so you can do a blaster rifle. And if you really want the fist alternating sort of pose, then you could buy the deluxe one. Because personally, I'm not a fan of the fists. They just look so small. For the bulk and sort of imposing presence of this droid, I feel like the hands are just quite small. We were sort of tapering down here from the arms, and then we've got this little tiny clenched fist. For some reason, the open hands just look a little bit more scaled. Still small, but at least we've sort of got the extended fingers to give just a little bit more size to them. And of course, holding onto a blaster, you're not looking directly at the hand quite as much. When they're just doing this, it looks so small. I just didn't actually really notice that when it was in the packaging, because of course I'm just sort of looking at the overall. I really think it's interesting just how many small details you pick up when you really spend time going over all of the details. So the articulation and all of the joins, because it's a droid, it's really easy to add in articulation because the articulation points are just extremely visible. So I do find the hands to be quite tight, and I'm being trying to be a little bit delicate with them, because if this is the same sculpt as the original figure, which I assume it is, we can pull these hands out. So there's a tiny little peg in here. So I do find that these articulation points, particularly at the wrists, are a little bit stiff, and I'm not going to stress them out too much because I don't want to accidentally sort of break off that attachment peg, but they move very nicely at the elbows. We can rotate. Oh, it's a little bit stiff. There we go. Rotate it, move it around in sort of ways that humans wouldn't necessarily move. And of course we can get that fist pose there. So he can be ramming the door. It just looks very small. I do like the movement at the torso. It moves side to side, so you can kind of get that sort of ramming action or something like that. But he doesn't, the backwards and forwards is a little bit, it just kind of doesn't stay there. But I do find that is the case on most of these figures. You can kind of bend them back, but they just kind of want to come back up. So it's more for just sort of giving us, I like that I can kind of tip it to the side, and it kind of keeps those side angles, which is kind of fun. And obviously turning is really easy because we've just got a much more slender. There's no sort of costume sculpting details here to get in the way of us being able to rotate that midsection around. Really nice and easy. It is kind of funny seeing a belt on a droid like this. And the legs, now we're not really going to be doing a lot of kicking. Probably I'm not going to be doing a lot of kicking in the posing here for this particular figure. We don't go to the forward sort of pose very well because we've got these thick armor plates here on the thighs, and we've got these little pouches on the belt. So it is hitting here. So I'm probably not going to get a lot of kicking going here, but we can go out to the side very easily, and we can go a little bit more to the back. But to be honest, that's probably about as much as I really need from this. You can see that this isn't actually that rubbery. This back pouch section here, that is quite fixed. So this isn't a rubbery belt like sometimes we see on some of these sort of figures where we have sort of parts that hang down. The whole component is made from more of a rubbery plastic. That is hitting and not really flexing much. We can see it's kind of sculpted, flared out a little bit, and that's about as far out as I'm going to go. So again, he's straight out of the packaging. It's a little bit stiff. We just got to... there we go. finally. It always makes me anxious. I don't want to break my new toys. Okay, and the ankles, there we go. So let's see how far back. Okay, so nice angle there at the knees. Of course, that's about as high as we're going to get because of those angles between the armor plates are going to hit, and I can get that foot all the way pointed out like that. It kind of looks like he's running or dancing, but yeah, good articulation, about what I was expecting there. We also have, if I just connect his feet back in the right spot, we've got a small little hole here in the right thigh, and that is for attaching the blaster rifle accessory onto it. It doesn't have a peg. It kind of connects with the magazine that is sticking out the side. I'll just test that in a minute. Just want to test the leg flexing on the other side because, of course, we've got another pouch on this side. The pouches are symmetrical in the back, so it's going to limit the leg in sort of the same manner. We can go up on this side. I can get to about there. That's not too bad. Somehow I feel like that one is a little bit more limited. I'm not sure why that one is stopping a little bit before this one does. So I can kick up this one a little bit better if I really want to do sort of kicking a door down or something like that. Yeah, and then of course we've got some printing and details stamped here on the inside of the left thigh, and we also have a little bit of printing here, Hasbro China, on the inside of the right thigh. It's a little bit hard to see because it's just that black plastic raised there with the other plastic. So I feel like I can move the legs around a good amount. They're a little bit stiff at the joints, but I do like that so that they're not going to get floppy. But he's just a little bit hard to balance. I would have thought he would be sort of quite a sturdy figure. Sometimes the bulkier figures stand up better than the thin figures, especially some of the female characters. They're very slender. Sometimes they just don't have enough mass to sort of stand up on their own very well. This one, he's just fighting me just like my deluxe figure was. He's definitely one that's going to need a stand. I think it's interesting. We can see that on the underside we have two peg holes, one sort of at the heel and one further forward. We've got one for the jet boot sort of flame effect. So we still have that same attachment points there, even though this figure doesn't actually come with them. So I'm just going to test out the blaster rifle, and then we'll get the other deluxe figure for some comparison. So I'm just going to test that out. It's a nice sculpted blaster rifle. I'm assuming this is going to be exactly the same as the deluxe figure. It's pretty black. It's kind of a gloss black and not a gunmetal or anything like that. I like the fact that it's a black, so it's going to look really nice with the figure. We've got lots of little fine detail there. It does have a very small little grip here and no trigger guard, so this should go very easily into the hands. But let's just test that attachment point. It's black on black, it's hard to see, but let's press that on, and that fits on pretty well. So if it's marching down the corridor, you can see it's kind of sticking out a little bit. Mine isn't going all the way in, but it stays there pretty well. So I think this is better if you had the two fists of the deluxe one, because he's got this pointed sort of finger. But I guess you could have, you know, if you're army building them, the ones further back in the ranks could be, you know, sort of marching with their blasters holstered. And now we're going to put this one in the front because this is going to be one of my hero ones. So we can see the hand there with that trigger finger, which doesn't really need to fit into anything. It's a very small grip. There's just a tiny little sort of notch here, little bit that just sort of sticks out that just seems to fit just with that finger. Extended sort of robotic finger there. It's not a big grip, it does fit into the hand really well, and because we don't have that gripping hand, the best I can do is just kind of putting that fist underneath it. But to be honest, that's kind of an odd way to do it. So one of the things that I think this one does actually do pretty well is if you like the single-handed sort of blaster pose, pointing out, sometimes when figures have this kind of grip laying down sort of at their side, it looks odd. It looks like they're sort of trying to hold something that's not there. Sometimes I wish figures either came with a neutral hand or maybe like a gesture. Because this one's more of a fist, it actually looks kind of cool if you're not doing a two-handed pose. It just kind of looks menacing to be marching with its fist sort of clenched like that. So that does look kind of cool. And because I can't hold it with a two-handed pose, I don't think I'm going to bother even trying, because it's just going to be sort of balanced underneath the blaster rifle. It's kind of unusual that they chose to picture it like that on the back of the backing card. I didn't even really notice because it's so black that it isn't actually holding the blaster rifle with the left hand, but he holds it well. It looks cool. I'm going to just move this arm off to the side a little bit. And I really wish I could stand this one up a little bit better, but I'm just going to hold him here. And I'm going to grab my deluxe trooper figure. So this is my one that I previously unboxed. And you can see he's got his hands holding the blaster rifle properly. You can see he's got the full grip there, black on black, a little bit hard to see, but he is holding it properly around the underside of the blaster rifle there. Looks really cool. But something that I can see that's a little bit different, and this is going to be a little bit hard to show. I'm pretty sure these are pretty much the same figures. There's just a couple of little things. I noticed that the printing on the leg here, and it could just be, you know, variation from figure to figure, it looks really thin and faint. The printing on this one, if I can move his legs out of the way a little bit, just looked a little bit more prominent. And I kind of like the fact that it's a lot more fainter on this one. But again, that could just be a little bit of just you know, this one's just a little bit more lighter on the paint. It's not very visible. This one, very visible. Now, something that I wasn't a fan of this figure was the way that the belt on this one was kind of skewed. It sort of felt like my particular figure was perhaps assembled not quite right. And something you can kind of see the little rods here. This one is kind of flaring out and it's not touching anything. This one here in the back looks completely bent, and it's a little bit hard to sort of get the camera to focus because it's black on black. You can see it's straight on this side and this one is bent off to the side, and it just kind of gave the whole thing a bit of a wonky bent kind of effect there. And on my particular figure I had a scratch on the lower leg here, which does show up a lot on that gloss black finish, which I wasn't a fan of, but I couldn't see it because it was inside that plastic-free packaging deluxe box. So I just didn't like the way that this one sat. It just kind of gave it a very sort of flimsy, not quite right look, especially when I can see all the way through to the back that bent rod. This one's not really connecting to anything. When I look at this one, now this one looks proper. The belt is straight, the rods are going straight up. Oops, just dropped his blaster. And here in the back, we can see that those rods are sitting where they should. And I feel like, I hate to be cynical, but because these particular figures are packaged in invisible bubbles, sometimes I wonder if the quality control is a little bit better, a little bit tighter on the construction. I know this one, it could have just been a fluke, random one, but I didn't like that one. And considering I paid a lot more for this deluxe figure than I did for the standard figure, it's kind of annoying. I know I can essentially swap them around. I've got separate pieces and things like that, but the fact that this one looks straighter, looks just more proper, it feels more properly sort of assembled. You can just see the hip on this one, it just looked wonky, and I didn't like the fact that those little rods were bent in the construction. So yeah, just so much more a fan of this one. Even though I've got this fist, which means I can't do it in a two-handed grip, I do have this one. So if the two-handed grip is a real bother for you, you will probably have to track down the deluxe one. Of course, it also comes with this sort of charging bay accessory, which was kind of fun, so that we could, you know, sort of stand him up in there. I found that these sort of connector hoses didn't really work for supporting the figure. It was just fiddly to get him in there. It just kind of hooked under the arms. It didn't really sit right. Of course, the deluxe one, I've got so many pieces here, also came with those flame effects that you could attach to the boots. But then, of course, you can't stand your figure down. You'd have to sort of get some fishing line, some thin nylon line, and kind of suspend it flying, like when they capture Grogu on Tython in that episode, The Tragedy. So you can sort of have them flying with the jet boots, but of course, they're not going to stand on them either. And then you can see that we have these spare hands from the deluxe one, these small fists. So let's just grab the left one, We can see that that looks like pretty much the same component. So they have simply just assembled this one using one hand from one set and the fist from the other set from that deluxe figure. So overall, you can see I've got lots of spare parts for my deluxe figure. I like this sort of piece of set building. I didn't really want to buy multiples of that one just to have a row of these all together, and I'm not using the flame effects or the spare hands. I don't like pulling the hands out of Black Series figures or TVC. It just makes me anxious. So I kind of like the fact that this one comes with, you know, no swappable hands, but perhaps for the sake of collectors and posing, it would have been better to have the two open hands so that you can hold the blaster rifle properly, especially if that's how it's pictured on the back of the backing card. I think it's really funny that it isn't actually possible to really pose it properly, like the picture on the front of the backing card where he's sort of marching down the corridor holding the blaster rifle in two hands. So overall, fantastic figure. Just the feel of this one, though it's still made out of the same materials as this one, this one feels better constructed. I could have just gotten a really bad dud with this one. It just never looked quite right. It always looked a little bit wonky, and it gave it a bit of a flimsy feel because it didn't feel like it was assembled correctly or something was broken. This one feels sturdier because it feels, you can clearly see it's assembled properly. We don't have these sort of bendy, wonky parts in the middle. So it looks proper, and it looks, yeah, just looks cool. Everything else looks to be pretty much the same, except for we just have those interesting sort of alternating hands there. Kind of wish I could pose it like this because he just looks really cool with the two-handed grip. For me personally, because I have both, I can swap them around. Maybe I will put the punching fists on this one and swap that hand over because of course they'll have the same attachment points if the mold is the same. So I could perhaps swap the grip hand on this one. Then this one can be my hero one at the front of my display shelf. And then this one, perhaps I could have the punching fists and we'll just pop him in that sort of charging bay accessory in the background because he's a little bit wonky. He needs a little bit more support. So he can stand in the charging bay and this one can be the one in the front. But yeah, I'm really hoping I can find more of this figure. It's fantastic for army building. I love the Darktroopers. We see so many of them in the Mandalorian series. They're so formidable and they just look really cool when there's a lot of them. Oh, I'm really happy that this one is actually better than my existing one. It would be a little bit painful to finally get one and it ended up having the same kind of issues as that original one. I'm really happy with this one. Apart from the fact that it's hard to make it stand up, he just wants to kind of just fall over. Every now and again, I can kind of get him balanced there. This one has the same kind of issues, you know, takes a little bit of work to get them to stand up. We get there, but yeah, really cool figure. They'll just need some stands there, but overall, this was fun. You know, this is one of the few times where I'm able to sort of get a little bit of an army build going on. Anything that can be army built is really popular for us here in New Zealand. You know, stormtroopers, battle droids, clone troopers, they always fly off the shelves really fast. So I'm excited that I was able to find this one with that fantastic backing card, but I'm going to be on the hunt for more because I'm happy that this one doesn't have the issues that I found with my original deluxe one. So really exciting. Of course, this one is a lot cheaper than a deluxe figure as well, so that's exciting. So this was fun. I loved being able to see this one with that fantastic backing card and compare it to my deluxe one and see what was different and what was the same. It was really fun. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another vintage Star Wars vintage collection figure, and I had a lot of fun at checking out all of the details. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon or evening wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a vintage collection fan, I recently opened up the HK87 Assassin Droid Arcana version. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole vintage collection playlist. This is the way.